going to talk about John Lennon. Um, as most of you know, if you're watching, he is a Beatle or was a Beatle. I'll give some of the history of the case, and then Christina can help break down some of the details, analysis. So basically, John Lennon had a child from a previous marriage, Julian Lennon, and then he married Yoko Ono, the famous Yoko Ono, and they had a child together. I didn't even know they had a child together. Um, and 10 years or so before John Lennon was murdered in the 80s, he had written a will. And in his will, he basically left everything to Yoko Ono and their child together and completely disinherited Julian Lennon. So, of course, a court battle ensued in New York. And this went on for 16 years between Julian and Yoko Ono, and it was eventually settled. The amount is not disclosed. The speculation is that he received 25 million, whereas the estate was valued at 800 million. So he would have otherwise have been entitled, if it would have been normal distribution, to a quarter of the estate. So it would have been 200,000. So it was a big reduction. So I think we'll stop there. There's another little funny detail I can share a little later, but why don't we stop there? And Christina, what do we have to say about this?
So I think a couple of things starting out was, having a will is always a great thing. Everybody needs a will, but there's other documents in place that kind of make it harder to contest things. So when you have a will here in New York, when you pass away, whether you're married and have children, your children have to sign off on your will. And basically, they have to agree to allow the executor to be appointed and agree to the distribution. So in this case, because he was written out of the will, he contested it. And that made it be held up in court for years and years, where it forced the executor to pretty much settle, because nobody could get their inheritance, nobody could make a distribution until things were settled. So, it forces a settlement rather than going forward to see, okay, which side is going to win. And that's the majority of contested estates today. And even the judges, they push you to settle. Nobody wants to go to the trial. Nobody wants to have a full hearing on the matter. It's sometimes very difficult to prove that the will, was done under duress or undue influence. So they force settlements. Whereas if you have a private document such as a trust, there's no court involvement. You don't need that waiver from the heirs. The trustee has the authority right away to act, and then it would be up to the heir to bring the proceeding. So people are less likely to bring a proceeding when there's a trust involved, because it's a lot harder to contest a trust as opposed to a will.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know that I saw the will. Did you see the will? I don't remember if there was specific language in the will about Julian, and we would normally put what's called a no contest clause, which says that if anybody does contest this will and tries to, delay it and make all these, problems for the estate, then even if they were to win on their claim, so Julian would say, well, I'm the son, I was intentionally my father was coerced into signing this will. Even if he would have won, the provision would disallow any recovery. So it's a way to avoid, hopefully, people contesting the wills, because at the end of the day, they won't win, even if a judge determines that it was, in fact, coercion or whatever it is. So we don't know. I don't know if John Lennon actually had a no contest clause in his will. Do you remember if that was in there, Christina?
I don't remember seeing anything, no.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's something that John could have done if he really wanted to prevent this. Generally it's a problem once you start disinheriting people, because it's almost like inviting conflict. So what I try to do with clients, and Christina, maybe you can share, is try to give them something, or just to give them some things to make them happy enough to go away and not disturb the people that you intended. Obviously all families have crazy dynamics. There's a lot involved. That's not going to be the situation for everybody. But really working with an estate planning attorney to know what could go wrong here and how can I prevent it is really important when doing this kind of estate planning if you have such family dynamics.
Yeah, so as I said before, what I do if clients come to me and they say, I just don't want to leave anything to my son or my daughter, not for any reason, but even if they said they're very well off, they have a lot of money, they don't need my money, but, my son B is not as well off, I convince them to do a trust, because even though son A is well off, it doesn't mean that they're not going to feel a certain type of way and try to contest it. And even just hold it up. And maybe they don't contest it. Maybe not necessarily they're fighting it, but they just don't want to be bothered. I have an estate now that I'm working on where the heirs that had to be notified just didn't have contact with the decedent. And so they're not contesting it, but they're not willfully signing off on our waivers. So now we have to issue a citation, and that alone delays things at least 60 to 80 days. So having a trust in place would have avoided all of that. So anytime there's any kind of maybe a conflict or leaving somebody out, I always push for a trust.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so the other fun part about this story is, not for Julian, of course, was that once everything was settled, Yoko Ono started auctioning off all of John's possessions that were in the house that was left to her. And that included memorabilia that John had from Julian. So Julian had written his father letters and his father had kept them. And Yoko Ono saw the value in those and started auctioning them for people to purchase. And so as it turns out, Julian, presumably using the money he inherited, had to bid and buy back his own memorabilia from his father. That was heartbreaking too. Christina, what do you want to add about that?
Well, with that, I just think that they were probably so focused on the dollar value of a settlement that they weren't thinking outside of the box. And sometimes we need to think of, okay, besides the dollar value, what else is there? What else of things that you wanted? He could have probably negotiated into the stipulation of their settlement. Well, not only do I get a dollar value, but I also want X, Y, and Z. At least they were letters written to him. I want my dad's letters. Who would have thought that somebody would buy them and auction them off? Who would do that to somebody? Personal letters that were written between a father and a son. But any way to make a dollar, people do. So just thinking more outside, I think that's where a good, experienced attorney comes in, where we're not just looking at the dollar value, but we're looking at other things. And sometimes, too, even estates that don't have a lot of money, that's what people fight over. They fight over the memorabilia. Who are we going to get? What are we going to get? How are we going to get it? And so if you're not really specific in your documents, it could lead to fights.
Yeah. Yeah, estate planning is complex. So, it can be overwhelming if you are, just starting on this journey. But that shouldn't deter you, obviously, from doing it, from learning from these lessons, and really being proactive in how to avoid those family conflicts and make your passing the beginning of a legacy that can continue in a positive way.
Yes.
So I think that's it on John Lennon. So the takeaways, as Christina mentioned, is instead of doing a will, best to do a trust whenever there's potential conflict between the distributing family members. No contest clause if you're going to try to discourage somebody from disputing and contesting the will. Or maybe just kind of figuring out some distribution so that there's less to fight about once everything is settled. Anything else you can think of, Christina?
No, that's about it.
Okay. Well, have a good night, guys. Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to message us, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.